All right. It should be, I think it was recording before, but I'll cut that, but we should be good now.
All right, we're rolling. Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming out and attending this session on AI literacy. My name is Katrina Ingram. I am a volunteer and a fellow with ForHumanity, and we're really excited to share some work that we've been doing on this very big topic of AI literacy. So to kick things off, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Carrier. He's our executive director. He's going to share some thoughts on ForHumanity, and then we'll get into a little bit of a conversation. Ryan, over to you.
Thanks, Katrina. And thanks all of you for joining today. The session will be recorded and will be available to people once we finish. Many of you are new or maybe only a little bit familiar with For Humanity. So let me give you a little background. We are a nonprofit public charity formed in 2016 with a singular mission to examine and analyze the downside risk associated with AI, algorithmic, and autonomous systems. But we're not anti-technology in any way. We simply want to engage in the maximum amount of risk mitigations as possible, so that if we mitigate as much risk as possible from AI, algorithmic, and autonomous systems, that's our scope. We call them AAA systems, AI, algorithmic, and autonomous systems. If we mitigate as much risk as possible from those tools, then we maximize the benefits for humanity. And that's where the overly ambitious name of the organization comes from. We do all of this work in a Slack-based community, and everything that we do is kind of open. It's not open source, it's crowdsourced is the term we use, but it is open and transparent. And so if you join the community, which means two things. Number one, that you've given us your email address, and number two, that you've agreed to the code of conduct. Then you are welcome into our Slack-based community and access to all of our tools. Everything that we create is there for you to try to use. You can use it in non-commercial ways, like seeking compliance for your own organization, research possibly, or you can use it for commercial purposes, and we have licensing arrangements to help enable and empower you to do that. And we want to encourage you to do that as well. So you are all welcome beyond what we do today to join the For Humanity Slack. And you do that with a button at the top of our webpage called Get Involved. And there's a very short form that you're going to fill out to join. And when you do that, you get invited into Slack. And then we kind of can grow from there. Also, we have a course associated with this, but I think Katrina will probably get to that before the end of our talk. So let me turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. All right. So I just want to say one thing. When you join, you will get involved. It's not like some organizations where you join and nothing happens. That won't happen here. You will be tapped on the shoulder, asked to join different things, whatever your interests are. I can attest to that. All right, so what we're going to do today is have a little bit of a conversation about the work we've been doing on AI literacy. We're going to talk for about 45 minutes, then we're going to open it up. We love questions. If you've got questions, pop them in the chat. We're also going to invite some of the folks who've been really integral to this process. The volunteers have been part of this to come up and say a few words. I'll call on you at certain points, but for now, I want to get into this topic of AI literacy by just asking Ryan, why did we want to focus on AI literacy? What really drove For Humanity in this direction in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good foundation. So there's kind of two answers to the question. First is a legal requirement out of the EU AI Act. It is Article 4. It is enforceable now. And what we felt like was there was not sufficient understanding of what these responsibilities meant. And what I'm going to do right now is share screen, and I want to put the law in front of you for just a second. So we include this in our deck, and the law looks like this. Can I just confirm, thumbs up or whatever, that you're seeing? Excellent.
We see
Okay.
it.
So providers and deployers of AI systems. So the law says AI systems. We think in terms of AAA systems. Okay. So providers and deployers of AAA systems shall take measures to ensure, to the best extent, a sufficient level of AI literacy. Now, they don't really define what that means. And so we've got some other additional information that doesn't come from the law that's beginning to guide what that means. But it's AI literacy of their staff and other persons. So hang on to that for a minute. Dealing with the operation and use of the AI system. So think about that. The people who run the system, operation, and use. You don't kind of touch on what that means, but we're gonna provide some more color to that in a second. Taking into account the technical knowledge, experience, education, and training, and the context of the system. That's a lot of inputs, okay? But most notably, technical knowledge. The people operating this tool might have enormous amount of technical knowledge. They built the darn thing, right? All the way down to the people who use it, who may have absolutely no knowledge of the thing, okay? So we already have a range, and that tells us we need to think in multiple vectors. So we'll come back to that as well. So their experience, their education, their training, and then the context of how the tool is being used. And considering the persons or groups of persons on whom the AI systems are to be used. That is Article 4. Now I want to show you Recital 20. Now, Recital 20, we had a question about, sort of who this is done to or with. And Recital 20 gives us more color, and I just want to highlight this area right here. AI literacy should equip providers, deployers, and then this is the key part for us, and affected persons. That means the people who are using the tool, and they talked about using in Article 4, but it's basically the people who are using the tools. You need to train them on AI literacy. And this is an enormous step for organizations having to recognize that they actually need to train the people who are going to use their tools before they use them. And so we'll talk about how that comes to play for us. So number one, we had this issue of we need to help people be able to fulfill their legal obligations. Okay. Then ForHumanity, from our perspective of our mission, simply says AI literacy, education and awareness about artificial intelligence, about AAA systems, helping all persons have greater AI literacy helps to mitigate the risk of these tools. And so it fits our mission. It's required under the law, and that's why we engaged in this process. Back to you, Katrina.
Great explanation. I think it's really interesting because I think this idea of fitting your mission or fitting your values is so important. The surprising piece for some folks might be the law part. I think that's really interesting to call out and how this all fits together. All right, so we got this topic of AI literacy. It's super big. How is ForHumanity really defining AI literacy?
Um, if I go back to what we just read in the law, we're going to define it in context. And that context is going to be in the context of the people. Okay. So the first thing, and I'll share screen again. I promise I won't flip back and forth all this often, but there are some sort of core pieces that I want to put in front of people. So if I go back to our slide deck, and this slide deck is available to all of you, what we identified is 5 personas. So when we talk about a persona, they're personas that exist in the context. Oh, sorry, let me make this in slideshow. It'll be easier to see. There we go. So this is in context, taking consideration of their technical knowledge and their expertise. And I can also tell you that the AI board from the EU Commission has also said the things that you would do to train your people on how to do their job as it relates to an AI system, that is also inclusive of AI literacy. So when we took all of these factors into play, it broke down for us in 5 different personas. The first persona is users. They're impacted users and they are not your employees. Okay. And we get that from that affected users language in Recital 20 and also users of that AI system. And when we engage with these people, you'll see that actually we have a limited ability to engage with them. And we'll talk about why that is a little bit later. The second persona is still impacted users, but now you have them captured. And we think that makes a big difference because the training that you can require of them is higher because they're your employees. And for us, employees are employees, contractors, gig workers, service providers. We lump all of those together in this word employees. Okay. But because they work for you, you can demand or require more than you could of, let's say, the impacted users. And here's the reason for that. Impacted users, if you show up, let's say, to take a loan, and you're going to use an AI system to take that loan, if you say to them, oh, by the way, you got to take 30 minutes of training on this artificial intelligence system, you know what they're going to say? Adios. Goodbye. They will not stick around to use your system and have to be trained on it when they have other choices. Okay, and others won't probably won't demand quite as much of them, so they'll go someplace else. So we felt that those type of users, persona ones, needed a certain kind of education with the possibility for more. And again, we'll talk about that. But the persona two, we could demand sort of a slightly higher level because they're captured or they're captive as employees. Then we move to persona three and we say, okay, of that subset of employees, some of those employees work on this system. They have some technical knowledge, they have some expertise, they have different roles and responsibilities. And they're no longer impacted stakeholders. They're the ones driving the operations. So this has to be training AI literacy based on what their duties and functions are. Then we move to persona four, top management. Top management, and you can imagine an organization like Google, which might have literally hundreds or thousands of AI systems. What is top management supposed to know in context of their duties? And the answer is, well, that's very different than our persona three persons, because those persona three persons have roles and responsibilities on the system itself, whereas top management and oversight bodies have duties or responsibilities across all of these AIs. Okay. And then finally, we have persona five, which is your AI system leaders, anybody who's a decision maker in regards to the AAA system. They have vast technical expertise, vast knowledge, vast experience. So what we felt we needed to teach this group, or sorry, teach sounds a little, I want to be careful about that language. What we want to enable and empower with AI literacy for these AAA system leaders who could be some of the greatest minds in the world about artificial intelligence. Okay. We felt that what they needed to be taught was very different than than those, let's say, impacted stakeholders or somebody who has line item duties. Okay. They needed more overview. They needed more context. They needed changes in the marketplace discussed so that they could stay current on their AI literacy. So what that's done is that's led us to have this five persona approach, which we think enables and empowers learning management coordinators to know what their responsibilities and duties look like as they deliver this AI literacy training. Does that make sense for you, Katrina?
It does. And I think one of the interesting things when people see a finished work, they kind of think, oh, I guess everybody came to the table and it was really obvious that this idea of personas. That wasn't my experience. And I'd love to just kind of unpack the experience. How did we actually get here to this level of knowing that, yeah, this is a good way to do it. And this is how we should even define things. So we can maybe unpack the experience a little bit for people.
Sure. I think it was going through those words, and I'll scroll back. It was going through these words: technical knowledge, experience, education, training, context, trying to figure out what that meant to all possible persons. And so that context for an impacted user is vastly different than the context for that AAA leader. Vastly different. And so as you know, you sit down to do this and you're like, AI literacy, okay, we got some basic points. Here's what the benefits are, here's what the risks are. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Benefits to who? Risks to who? And when you add that perspective in, it causes you to go, okay, well, a benefit here to a corporation, to an AI, AAA systems leader, that might be a risk to an impacted user. And vice versa. Benefit here might be a risk over here. So as we approached perspective, it necessitated meeting the learning objective needs to different perspectives. And that's sort of how we began to break these out. And it kind of grew each time we thought about a new context, a new level of expertise, a new level of technical knowledge, roles and responsibilities. And these personas sort of fell out of that process. Does that make sense, Katrina?
Absolutely. And so I think that there was, for those of you who weren't part of that process, lots of fulsome discussion to get to that point. And I think that's really important. That's what this community is all about, is really hashing through things together and coming to some level of agreement. So let's turn now and let's talk a little bit about the actual content in the AI literacy. We're covering everyone. That's pretty big. We've often referred to this as our smorgasbord. And when you look at the materials, it's a whole lot of stuff. So I want to unpack this just a little bit more, maybe start a bit high level and give a bit of an overview of what's in here, and then talk a bit about the structure, how we've got things laid out.
Yep. And one thing, Katrina mentioned it, but I wanna highlight it. This isn't the normal webinar format, right? Normally, you all might be behind the scenes, and if you ask questions, they don't pop up in all the. This is a totally open forum. This is not rehearsed. This is not pre-planned. I mean, Katrina and I talked about questions and kind of what we're going to talk about, wanting to make sure we teach well in terms of what's here. But we want your questions when I say things or Katrina says things or anybody else, and you're like, huh? Or what was that? Or can you explain that differently? Do that, because that's what this is about. We do ask you to raise your hand electronically, and something that I always teach people who are in ForHumanity and coming to our regular meetings. The chat is my personal kryptonite. I never seem to look at it. So I'd rather you raise your hand and speak and sort of let us know if you've got some questions. But if you do want to just put things in the chat, Katrina or some others will
I will
read
be
it.
monitoring the chat because I know some
Exactly.
people prefer that. So you go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll bring it up to Ryan.
100%. So as we go through this, do ask questions, interact. You're not going to mess anybody up. Okay. So what's in here for each group is, and I'm going to scroll ahead to the personas for just a second. So in persona one, what we've laid out is kind of some general ideas of how to train each of the five personas. So each section of persona will have this, kind of break in the deck, and then we're going to get into how to train. So for example, we feel, and we debated this back and forth, that when you train your impacted users, those persona ones, you probably can't get more than 5 minutes of their time. This goes back to that idea that I shared, and I'm not going to get into all these details, but I'm going to give you an idea of what's here. The idea that you only have a certain amount of time that they'll give you. And so we thought about all of those characteristics for each one of the personas, and we created a page on how to. Then we created a page on metrics. So what are the metrics of success? How will you know that you've achieved what you're hoping to achieve in training any one of these five personas? And then finally, in the middle of each persona section, you're going to find a whole list. And let me flash forward. I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to just flash forward. So here's a persona. Let's go to a persona 3. That's persona 4, persona 3. Ah, this is perfect. Okay. So I'll make this bigger. What you see here is just under the header of incident response. Now, why does it say that? It says incident response because for some learners, some people who have to go through AI literacy training, their duty is around incident response. or it might relate to or plug into incident response, or it might not. So if it doesn't, then any of these learning objectives might not be applicable to any of those Persona 3 learners. Or if it is applicable, we've given you in this case 2, 4, 6, 8, I think that's nine bullet points of learning objectives about incident response. So now what does a learning management coordinator do? They're going to interact with the AAA systems leader that they're creating AI literacy about, and they're going to understand in context about the AAA system, what does incident response look like? And so you'll be able to craft simple bullet points like be able to identify, explain, and locate the incident management policy. Well, that's going to be different in Katrina's organization, and it's different than mine, and it's different than Paul's, and it's different than Marissa's. So we have to get into the details specifically of where the incident response policy might reside. And that's part one, and that's part one of the training. So when we talk about everything that's here, what we have is kind of how to train at each of the persona levels. And these are recommendations, they're not absolutes. We have what are the metrics of success. And then finally, we're going to get into the details guiding you as to how to identify the learning objectives on a use case by use case in context basis. Does that answer the question, Katrina?
Absolutely. And I just want to point something out. If you're looking at all of this and you're feeling like, holy smokes, I'm totally overwhelmed, that is a very normal reaction to have. And that is why we call this a smorgasbord. It's not, you're not going to eat everything in the whole place. What your job now is to do is to take from this buffet that we put together and then craft what that meal is going to look like for that different persona in the context of your organization. So there's a lot of options, let's say, but don't feel overwhelmed by seeing so much there. That's how we've designed this thing. All right, I think that's a good. Oh, sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, it just made me think that maybe this is a good place to put this out there. So we're doing this session now. It's recorded. You can refer back to it anytime you like. You have the deck. The deck will be in front of you. You're welcome to have it. We'll put both things in the link. When I shut up for a minute, I'll make sure I put the links in there so that you get them all. So you have those resources. But what in talking with our board of directors and in talking with our expert team that was putting this together, what we realized is that this is a lot to take in. And so what we're going to do is introduce a course, a short form course that will be taught live, 30 minutes per day, starting December 1st. And I don't know how long it's going to go. It might be 5 days, it might be 7 days. So it's kind of 3 hours of learning where we will try to go in a deeper dive into each one of these to kind of help you understand better how to action them. Okay, so today is the 90-minute dive where we're talking about kind of the whole concept, and then that learning and training session will be available December 1st. You can register for it right now, and again, I'll put the link forward. The learning part of it will be free. If you want to be certified that you've taken that learning, there'll be a small fee associated with that. So there are ways to go deeper, and ForHumanity wants to help go deeper through that training course.
Excellent. And that's a great segue to talk about what I want to talk about next, which is how all of what we're doing here connects to this bigger ForHumanity canon of work. And specifically, I want to talk about top management pillars. So can you unpack some of that and then how that connects to the work we're doing here in AI literacy?
That was good and not one I was prepared for. I could have been because it's on our talk list, but give me just a second to stop oh, I already stopped the share. So I need to escape. There we go. And I need to pull this one up. There we go. And I'm going to put those pillars in front of you because it's a little bit easier to understand. So here's the share again. So what For Humanity does in terms of our general, well, this is all in the context, and For Humanity's primary work is called independent audit of AI systems. We support an ecosystem where third-party independent auditors, not us, can use our process and our framework to assure compliance with laws, regulations, guidelines, standards, and best practices, whether that's the EU AI Act, GDPR, California privacy, Indian personal data protection, the list goes on and on. There's over 50 different certification schemes inside For Humanity. In establishing this general governance, oversight, and accountability for the robust and reliable and responsible and trustworthy application of AAA systems, we identified that top management and oversight bodies, and let's take a moment to make sure we're speaking the same language. Top management and oversight bodies is the CEO, it's the C-suite, the board of directors. Oftentimes, it's going to be the legal team. It's going to be the quality management team. They sit at the enterprise level of an organization. Now, if you have a small organization like 5 or 7 people, these lines blur, and that's natural and normal. But what it does tell you is even if you are a CEO of a small firm and you have a crackerjack team who's built your AI systems, it doesn't mean you CEO don't have duties and responsibilities associated with that tool because you do. And those duties are listed here. They're summarized across the board. The one that we want to really highlight here is that there is a duty to define your stakeholders. And once we've defined those stakeholders, we now have all of our personas and we have to meet those obligations. We have a training and education duty that goes across all 5 of these levels, and that duty resides at the top management and oversight body level. Whether it's because of regulatory compliance, whether it's because we have a duty of care, whether it's because we want to uphold system integrity and risk management, all of these pillars point in on this duty of care, this responsibility of top management and oversight bodies to duly train, to duly provide AI literacy. And if you think back to what the law said, and I'll take you back there, the law doesn't say that the AAA system leads are responsible for AI literacy. What does it say? It says that the providers and deployers have this duty. And so that means the organization has the duty. Who's responsible for the organization? Top management and oversight bodies.
Can I just clarify a term because this might be new for some of the folks here, and it's something I still try and wrap my head around. Provider and deployer.
Sure.
You're using that language, and I want to just kind of clarify what that means.
Yep. So this is EU AI Act language that For Humanity has chosen to adopt globally to describe different duties, to describe different entities in the delivery of a AAA system. A provider of a system is the one who trains the system, who creates it, who establishes its scope, nature, context, and purpose. They are OpenAI. They are, and actually OpenAI in the context. So you have OpenAI, right, creating a GPT. Let's just say GPT-5. But then that GPT-5 might be provided to Microsoft. Now, here's the key distinction between provider and deployer. A deployer would have to take GPT-5 and pass it through without substantial modification and without putting your own brand on it. So Microsoft couldn't just say, I'm taking GPT-5 and I'm making it Microsoft 5.0 or Copilot. Okay. They can't do that and remain a deployer. If they took GPT-5 and said, we're making sure that you receive GPT-5 for whatever work you're doing with my company, then they can be a deployer of that system. So the key and critical distinction here is that you're not making substantial modifications to the AAA system and that you are not putting your own brand over top of it. That's according to the EU. For Humanity, excuse me, For Humanity takes pretty much the similar approach around the world in making the distinction between these tools. The provider is the one who is establishing the scope, nature, context, and purpose, how the tool operates. The deployer is making sure that it reaches users for a specific purpose. Does that clarify things,
Yeah.
Katrina?
Absolutely. And so it really makes a difference who you are and what your obligations are in this whole thing. But our AI literacy project is kind of covering a scope, covering this very wide scope of different kinds of stakeholders. I want to, before we move into stakeholders, I want to get there. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to connect these ideas. You've showed us the top pillars, and that's the work that ForHumanity has done as part of our bigger canon. You've talked about the personas. Let's bring these two things together in an example. Show us exactly how this works.
Yep. So let's do persona one. It will be kind of the simplest approach. And let me just take us there. Here we go. Okay. So for persona one, we have these generic learning objectives. And what we want to talk about is, first off, generic uh, AI literacy points that we want to make. And then we also want to make sure that we're referring to the specific system. Okay. So AI literacy for a persona one means, and we use this example a lot, so we'll keep going with it, which is I am a loan originator. I am a large financial institution, and I'm using artificial intelligence to help you originate a loan. Okay. So you are the user, you are the impacted stakeholder, you are the persona one. Okay. So in general, what we decided were the key learning objectives and key characteristics here is that first off, we need to keep this under 5 minutes, and it could be 2 minutes or it could be 1 minute if you can describe the tool and its usage and the following bullet points in that period of time. It might be a very low risk system, and therefore the risks of the tool might be minimal. Okay. Or it could be a very high risk system, in which case you're going to maximize out those 5 minutes. We're going to define AI. So we think talking to persona ones, if you use the Artificial Intelligence Act language, it's going to miss people. So what we are essentially advising is that you define AI as follows: a digital tool that's designed to replace or assist human decision making. So think about that from your perspective as providing this learning. You're basically saying to them, we've taken some things that 10, 20, 50, 100 years ago were done exclusively by humans, and now we have machines doing some of the decision making along the way. Could be filtering, could be making sure that there's no errors in this loan application. Whatever it might be, AI can be involved. Okay. Then we're going to discuss the benefits of using and interacting this system. Maybe we're streamlining things. Maybe it's easier. Maybe it's a more rigorous approach to documentation. Maybe it allows you to make changes over time in the documentation as needed. So these are some of the benefits. We're going to discuss some of the risks. Okay. You've given us a whole bunch of information and data about you. That's a privacy challenge. That's a privacy risk. If we don't do our jobs with that information, then that could leak and cause you harm. So we have benefits and we have risks. And then we're going to provide those users, and we call them AI subjects in our certification schemes. So they're subject to the AI, which is where that language comes from. We're going to give them with the ability to learn more or find additional resources. That you might not be satisfied as a persona one coming to this for the first time and going, oh, you're training me about AI. I've heard about some of these benefits. I've heard about some of these risks. I'd like to learn more about that. Well, as the deliverer of this AI literacy, you might argue or believe or be resource challenged to not be able to provide, not want to provide that more information. You might actually view it as a risk if you were to provide more information to those impacted users. And yet your users may want this information. So what ForHumanity's decided to do, and this is called phase 2 of our AI literacy work, is we're going to provide these resources, these learn more resources, to organizations for free. And we are in the process of developing all of this additional learnings that you can point to as an organization and say, if you want to learn more, here's a nonprofit public charity whose mission is to help you be smarter and more aware about these tools. Here's their assistance and their guidance. So that Learn More resource, we'll try to handle that for you. In addition, for Persona 1s, we have to make sure that we're doing system specific information. So we want a just in time. What does just in time mean? It means prior to engaging with the tool, we need to provide some notification that is requiring completion and acknowledgement and understanding of the use of the tool. Okay. So if we've done a 3-minute video, we're going to check and make sure that they acknowledge that they've watched the video. We're going to provide the context of the AI system and how it's about to be used. And then specifically, we're going to provide some guidance about how to use the tool. And all of this, all of these bullet points have to fit into roughly 5 minutes. Okay. So once we do that, then we have the following learning objectives included in this work. The learner should be able to define AI. They need to be able to state the primary functions of the tool. They need to describe how their actions affect the output of the tool. In other words, the information they provide or don't provide, how it impacts the outputs. Give examples of what can go wrong. That's those risks. We want to make sure that that's in their mind. And then describe the process for reporting concerns. So this is what we call an adverse incident reporting system. This should always be present in all AAA systems. It's required under the EU-AI Act in other sections we won't go into, but we want to be able to point the learner, the Persona 1 learner, to how to access this tool if they have a problem or if something's not working right, or where they might be able to opt out of the tool if that's applicable.
And Ryan, just before you move on, we do have a question in the chat, so I want to raise that for you.
Great.
It's from Boyan. So Boyan asks, sorry, how is it a risk if they provide the additional resources? Conflict of interest or legal risks of not providing complete information, for example?
Yeah. So if I go back here or I go back to the law, our belief, so I have to distinguish here. When I made that comment, it's not a ForHumanity comment. I deal with a lot of lawyers. And so lawyers sometimes will react to me in this way. From ForHumanity's perspective, you should provide all the information ever to make sure everybody is as educated as they want to be. That's what we would say. And that's why we do what we do. That is an enormous amount of resource expenditure. And organizations are going to say, that is not what the law requires of me. And therefore, I'm going to take more of a minimalist approach. And I understand that. That is capitalism at its finest / worst. Okay. So in putting together the AI literacy for Persona 1, what we've shown is what we think is the minimum requirement. If you were to go on as the organization and provide additional pieces of learning, what if that learning were faulty? What if you didn't maintain that learning over time and the law changed or the regulatory guidance changed or jurisprudence came out and ruled on interpretations and now your content is at risk? Why? Because you tried to do a good thing. You tried to teach, and this is the way lawyers think, right? You try to do a good thing. You're trying to teach people more, but in doing that, you didn't resource it sufficiently. You didn't keep it fully up to date. And now your information is faulty. You could be held liable for that. And this is where lawyers go, wait a minute. Don't say these extra words. Don't do these extra things unless we see the business reason, the compelling business reason to do it. If there's a compelling business reason to do it, you're going to do it and you're going to resource it properly. But it's not like corporate entities to go that extra mile when they don't need to. And so that's why I use that terminology. That's why I think lawyers think this way. And they may not want you to invest the time in learn a heck of a lot more, generically speaking. What does that have to do with us? We do a loan origination tool, and that's it. Okay. So that's why I use that. And so Boyan, if I'm saying that your name right, I hope I am. That's why I said those words.
Fantastic. And Boyan totally is on board with what you're thinking. So you've answered that question. So I'll let you go on.
Okay. So we have these learning objectives, and in the end, what is the goal? Is we want that learner to feel empowered to use the tool and to use it well and use it effectively. So the metrics that we associate with this, so remember the format. We have kind of the generic how, then we have the learning objectives themselves, and then we have the metrics. Okay. The metrics are tracking completion of the tool. You're going to want to record and log that that user went through that training. Why? Because there will be users in the future who will come back and go, wait, you didn't train me. You had a duty to train me. And you go, I have the log. Here's where you used it. Here's where you're trained. Here's where you acknowledged that you were. So this is a good risk management tool for tracking completion of the training. We want to also track the feedback loops. That's that adverse incident reporting system where they can say, I've had some problems, I've had some issues. You could put a survey on the back of this. Was this helpful? Was this effective for you? Did you like how it was delivered? And then, of course, you can track if people click that ability to learn more button. And that's another metric of we succeeded and we got them, interested enough, excited enough that they actually went to get some more training. So I use this as kind of the shortest example. If I did Persona 3, we'd be here for, well, what I think will be 5 to 7 days, which is the work that we're going to do in the course. So I'll stop there in terms of Persona 1 as an example of how all of our 5 personas work.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example. So a couple of things about this. I think that first of all, we are all Persona 1 in some way, shape, or form. So think about it. We're all kind of being impacted by various types of systems that we're engaging with. Increasingly, this is just becoming more and more ubiquitous. So this is super applicable to you no matter where you are, who you are in this whole context. I also want to just kind of focus on this idea of the just in time. If you wouldn't mind going back to that slide for a little bit, Ryan, I think this is really interesting. And we had a lot of conversation about this in our group. So just imagine you're on a website, favorite retailer, and you have a question and you're about to engage with that chatbot system. Something pops up that says, hey, you're about to engage with our system. Here's a little bit about it. You can kind of imagine what that would look like. And I find that really helpful as someone who is tasked with delivering these kinds of learning objectives across organizations. So you can imagine that sort of just-in-time learning taking place right before you're about to engage with that tool.
Yep, and it's also really critical in terms of many of these tools are going to ask or require personal data of you in the engagement, and so that pop up at the beginning, which is going to be in clear and plain language, it's going to be highly accessible, just ensuring that you recognize you, the user, recognize that you're kind of taking a meaningful step forward that could have legal or impactful consequences to you by stepping through. So that just in time is kind of that. Are you sure? Are you ready? You feel good? All right, let's go.
Yeah, because you could also walk away at that moment too. That's
100%.
that's your other option. All right, before we move on, I want to just invite the audience. If you have any questions, you go ahead and put them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and ask a question, we love your questions. So if you have anything before we move on, just want to take a little pause here and see if there's anything, any questions about anything we've covered so far. All right, well, if you have any, go ahead and put them in chat, raise your hand. I will, and we'll make sure your questions get answered. But Ryan, what I'm going to do, I know you said you don't want to go through all of Persona 3, and I agree, that's too much. But I would like you just to do one example, just one example of something in Persona 3. I want to show the depth of this material. And I think Persona 3 really illustrates the depth that we've gone to really think through fulsomely all of these different kinds of issues from a lot of different contexts. So just if you could show one thing, that would be great.
I'll do it with the headers, and then all of you will be able to see the bullet points underneath it. I don't expect you to. I'm not going to read through the bullet points. I'm not even going to talk through them unless you bring them up. Okay. But what this will allow me to do if I start here. So this is our AI literacy smorgasbord. Okay. For each of the 16 pillars. So there's 16 pillars associated with these learning objectives, and you'll see each pillar in a moment. We have a full list of learning objectives, and what we're trying to do is enable and empower that learning manager to know how to speak the language of the AAA system. Think about who some of these learning managers might be. They might never have dealt with AI before. They might, and I could be speaking to you, and by the way, you don't have to admit it, but it's totally cool if you come to this and you're like, my organization recently tasked me with doing this, and poof, AI, what? I can spell it. It's two letters, right? I can get there. So what we want to do is we want to enable and empower you to have robust conversations with the leaders of these teams so that you're interacting and building a training that is meaningful and impactful to Persona 3s. Okay. The learning managers are going to identify the learning objective for each learner. I think that should say learner. Yes, that should say learner. I'm going to fix it right now. Learner, real time development. Look at that. Okay. Um, Identify learning objectives for each learner according to their role and responsibility. So you are the learning management coordinator, and let's say everybody on this screen is Persona 3. Well, you're going to have to go through and go, okay, what does Evie do? What's Evie's job? What does Lauren do? What's Lauren's job? So on and so forth. You're going to have to understand that in the context. And we think no single learner will require learning objectives from all the 16 pillars. Here's the 16 pillars. So if you begin to think about, okay, well, what does Evie do? Sorry to pick on Evie, but you're one of the few on camera, and I love that. So thank you. So, Evie's responsible for being a human in the loop and engaging with incident response and engaging with change management. Therefore, I need the learning objectives associated with each of those pillars to train Evie. And then Lauren, who's also kind enough to be on camera, appreciate that. Lauren is over here in ethical oversight, and she's on the ethics committee, and she has duties associated with that. Well, those two things are separate. What Lauren and Evie need to do is, well, wait, are there a few places that we interact? And if we do, how do we interact? So ForHumanity covers that in each of these pillars. And now I'm going to walk you through the 16 pillars. Okay. So the training and educate for, well, first off, this is just laying out Persona 3. The training and education lead is going to work with Persona 5 persons. ForHumanity defines these persons. They are defined roles. Okay. There's an algorithmic risk committee. This is a collection of expertise that oversees the AAA system. And it could be people from data science to cybersecurity to business and so on and so forth. We have an ethics committee that's responsible for ethical choice of all AAA systems. We have somebody responsible for data, somebody responsible for testing, somebody responsible for cybersecurity, somebody responsible for monitoring, quality management, and AI compliance. Those people are your Persona 5s. Okay. And they're going to get a different level of training, but those are the people you're going to interact with to be able to create these learning objectives across these 16 pillars. So you're going to work with them to determine the scope, nature, context of the learning objectives, assign learning objectives to specific persons based on their role. So you're probably, let's say Katrina is the head of my algorithmic risk committee. I might go to Katrina and I might go, what does Lauren do? What does Evie do? What does Paul do? What does Saima do? So on and so forth, right? Figure out what all their roles and responsibilities are so then I can figure out what those people need to be trained on. And you could say to me, Ryan, I'm not sure that this is AI literacy. Isn't this just training, like on the job training? And I would have agreed with you 12 months ago. The AI board has come out and said that training people who work on these tools on their roles, responsibilities, duties, risks, interaction risks, and so on is required under Article 4. So even if it feels different to you, recognize that it has been decreed, at least in Europe, that this is part of those duties under Article 4 AI literacy. So once you figure out what everybody does, then you're going to identify, well, what is your method for learning and development? And you're going to pass along Persona 1. So Persona 1 says what we walk through. Persona 2 says do everything in Persona 1, but do some more things. And then, so that collection of information gets passed on to personas 3, 4, and 5 as well. If not, just to be aware of what they were trained on to make sure that there's duties in there for like persona 2 of, well, where do I get an acceptable use policy? Or where do I see what acceptable tools are? Okay, so all that information is equally useful to persona 3s. So now once we do that, then we're going to talk about how to train. Okay. So we're going to notify each person that they have this requirement. Maybe it's an annual requirement. Maybe we give you 30 days to do it. Maybe we give you 60 days to do it, whatever. We're going to recommend so we, ForHumanity, recommends a knowledge assessment. So for each of these persona threes, we actually want to determine that they learned what they needed to learn with a minimum score. So a passing grade and no less than knowledge checks with learnings based upon incorrect answers with immediate remediation. So what that means is we recommend the assessment, but that's not required by the law. So maybe you don't want to go that far. But what we would then say is, let's say you're going through and teaching. Each time you teach something to somebody, ask them, a couple of quiz questions about that. And if they get it wrong, teach them again what they misunderstood. So when we say knowledge checks, so knowledge assessment is a quiz, an exam, so on. A knowledge check is, did you get it? Did you get what I just said? Did it make sense to you effectively? We advise no less than an annual review of these learning objectives and recognize that the law could require something more. Okay. So when we say unless mandated by relevant legal frameworks, laws in certain jurisdictions may say, no, 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 no. We want quarterly assessments. Okay. That's what you got to do. And then finally, we want to make sure that these learning objectives are aligned to your organization's code of ethics and any applicable professional ethics. So your tool could be a law tool. Well, you're subject to the professional ethics and responsibilities, the bar association, and so on for what might have to be taught in these learning objectives. All right, how are we compiling the training? We're doing it in the context of what does the learner need to know based on job description, expertise, and their existing technical knowledge. Remember, all of these three descriptions here come straight from the law. And remember, we built this for the EU AI Act, but we built it for global AI literacy as well. We didn't find anything wrong with thinking about AI literacy in terms of job description, existing knowledge, and expertise and existing knowledge. That's why it's here. Tool-specific training, this has to make sure we understand what is it that this AAA system does, its purpose, its capabilities, and its integration to other corporate processes. Who is impacted by the system? As a Persona 3, you do need to know who are the impacted stakeholders, who are the users of the system. How does the learner's role facilitate achievement of the system's purpose? How do I fit in? The things that I do, if I'm Evie and I'm a human in the loop, how does my human in the loop-edness, right, fit into how we deliver this output from the AAA system? How are we allowed to use it? So in other words, do I deploy the whole thing, or do I just play my role and stick to my roles and responsibilities? And then what are we prohibited from doing? This is both from the law, from corporate policy, from code of ethics, from professional ethics, wherever it comes from. If we're prohibited from doing it, we need to make sure that people know what those prohibitions are. And then we're going to do this according to my roles and responsibilities. What's my role, duty? Where do my responsibilities begin and end? So I had that example of Lauren and Lauren's over here on ethics. Evie's over here, human in the loop. Where does Lauren's role stop? And where does my role as Evie start? Who does what to whom? It's always critical to make sure that these things are clear. Any other stakeholders and associated boundary conditions associated with my roles and responsibilities? How to use the system? What is the nature of the UX UI? So we have to understand, UX, user experience, UI, user interface. We have to understand how the output of the tool meets the impacted user. And then finally, goals and sufficiency of task completion. How do I know if I've done my job right? Lastly, associated usage, interaction, or support of the AAA system and associated ecosystem. What are the human interactions? What are their roles and responsibilities? The process and a procedure for proper interactions. error remediations, processes and procedures, and standard reporting functions. So this is how we're going to compile the training. And then finally, we get to in context specific tool training. What does the law tell us for this tool based on the jurisdiction? What are the legal obligations? When legal obligations are enforceable? Awareness of additional resources to support those questions. Be able to understand the scope of their duties and responsibilities and the segregation of duties amongst team members. I know that Lauren does ethics. I know that Evie does human oversight. Know the tasks they can and should do. Know the tasks they shouldn't do. Be aware of continuous learning resources from amongst all of the 16 pillars. Be able to state the phases of the organization's algorithmic life cycle and differentiate one phase from another. So not only who does what to whom, but when is it done in the production life cycle. Okay. And then be aware of general brand awareness, business positioning, rationale, and the context of the system deployment. So this is in context tool specific training. Now we get into the pillars. One of those pillars is ethical oversight. I don't know how many bullets it is. It's a lot. Okay. So what we're saying here is, okay, for Lauren, sorry to keep picking on you, Lauren, but it's a visual thing. So what Lauren needs to learn are these objectives, and we're going to go through with the tool and figure out what these learning objectives and how we answer them and how we teach about them for Lauren. As long as Evie doesn't have some ethical oversight responsibilities, she will not get that training. Okay. And then we move on, risk management. Well, Lauren and Evie, I didn't describe them as in the risk management function. Therefore, there's no learning that they need. But somebody who is in that risk management function is going to be taught on these basic bullet points. Testing and evaluation. Once we've developed our tool, we're going to test and make sure it does what it's supposed to do. The people who do that work have to be taught. They have to be taught based on these learning objectives. They're going to get that training specific for them. Paul Crafer is the testing and evaluation guru for the team. He's going to get trained on all of these specific learning objectives as it relates to the AAA system that he tested and evaluated or will test and evaluate.
So we don't have to do all of them. I'm not going to make you do all 16, but I wanted to give a flavor of how this works. And part of why I think it's important to set this up is now you get to see the depth. So you saw Persona 1 and what we're trying to do there. Now you're seeing a really deep level, and it gets, this goes into 4 and 5. We're not going to necessarily do that right now, but I wanted to give you a flavor of that. The other thing I think is really important to say is that this is a team sport. So if you haven't quite got picked up on that yet, notice that nobody is going to be an expert in all of these areas, but it's a combination of working together. So that's why we want to train people in all of these areas to be able to work together to provide that fulsome oversight. And I think that's a really important thing in the work that we're doing in ForHumanity.
And that's even true of those expert, the Persona 5s, the AAA system leaders. They might think, again, be careful with my words, it's all being recorded, right? They may think they know it all about the AAA system. It is highly unlikely that they do. They are reasonably unlikely. So let's say they built the system. They're reasonably unlikely to know how AI compliance and regulatory reporting happens. You know why? Because they've offloaded it to somebody else to do, or the legal department said, no, we'll handle that. Okay. And that's just one example. But a lot of times the way these tools are built, somebody engaging in risk management is just different from those who are doing the data science. And they're different and they plug in together, but they do so only at limited interfaces. Okay. So you also, as a learning management coordinator, don't want to be daunted by top management and oversight body responsibilities and AAA system leaders who are probably going to say things like, I don't need to be trained. And the answer is, well, actually, the law doesn't allow us to think that way. And actually, Katrina, I do want to flip ahead to Persona 5, the additional items. So let me just get there because I want to flash this for people. What we focused on with Persona 5 is they probably do, let's say you've got a Persona 5, the head of risk management. Do you need to train them on risk management? Probably not, right? It's their job. They created it. They probably created it way more than you. And they'd be like, well, what are you teaching me here? Well, it might be a review of the procedures we put in place, which is fine. But really, what we found is that we want to. So these are the people who are in 5. I went through this list already. What we want to do with Persona 5 is we want to get into some very specific things. So let me flash this up bigger. Sometimes what Persona 5s don't recognize are these things up at the beginning. The understanding of the direct and indirect stakeholders. They created a tool, but who is that? Who's the sales team selling it to, and how are they selling it? And how are they positioning that tool in the marketplace? But also indirect stakeholders. What is our environmental impact? Indirect stakeholder. What is our impact to society? Have we even thought about our impact to society? The people who should be thinking about this are Persona 5s. And by the way, they may or may not have thought about these impacts when they created the tool. Current awareness of risk and harms applicable to the AAA system. State-of-the-art awareness of risk controls, treatments, and mitigations. You built a great tool, Katrina. Thanks for building that great tool. Are you aware that control was a big issue with our tool? And oh, by the way, there's new standards, there's new ways to implement control over the tool. And are you aware of them? And have we thought about implementing them into our own tool in a change management fashion? And then an understanding of potential systemic risk, figuring out what could our tool create that is systemically risky out in the marketplace to many, many different groups, especially as it's adopted more and more. Let me give you a very simple example of this. When Facebook was created in 2005, it was not systemically risky. You know why? Because it only impacted a few students at Harvard. Flash forward 15 years later, and now it's being used so widely by so many people, it has systemic risk. And that systemic risk was that it may have influenced democratic institutions like voting. So this is an example of where we want to make sure that the perspective is kept for your AI leaders on what the impact of their tools might have from a systemic level. And then beyond that, we're making sure that the Persona 5 people understand all of the different components and again, how everybody plugs in together. Make sense, Katrina?
Absolutely. So two things, just that idea of scale, super important when we kind of consider risks and harms and impacts. The other thing, and this is a message especially for those of us who do learning and development work, how you package this message is as important as the message itself. And I say that as someone who works with a lot of the folks that are in this Persona 5 world. And so there's a lot of opportunity for you as a learning and development professional to package that work in a way that's really going to land with your particular Persona 5 stakeholders. So lots of flexibility here for you to think about how to best do that for your stakeholders. And that sort of brings me to stakeholders. I want to get to some of our stakeholders because we have some awesome people who are here on the call who are really integral to this process. And I thought it would be nice if they're willing, if you want to, just to kind of weigh in a little bit and say a few words about working on this particular project. So I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I'll just, people I noticed who are in the room, Stefan, Laura, Deborah, Paul, Anne Armstrong, all of you were kind of involved in this. I don't know if you want to kind of just unmute and say a few words about working on this project as part of a team. Anyone want to do that? Maybe raise your hand so we know who wants to go. Or not. That's okay too. Stefan. Yeah. Okay, we'll go Stefan and then Paul.
Thanks, Katrina. Just throwing a couple of words. I think it's really been a very inspiring journey with Ryan, you, Paul, and so many other individuals. I've really learned enormously much in the course of the past year that I've been part of the organization. It's always a wild ride. There's obviously so much happening out there in the market as well that is also really interesting to follow, being part of this community and seeing all the different views, opinions, and statements that come up from various individuals that are part of ForHumanity. So I will definitely continue to pursue my volunteering here as much as I can. I'm currently also in an EMBA course, writing my thesis here right now as we are on this webinar. So I can only highly recommend becoming part of the organization if you're not yet, and to get engaged. There's a lot of opportunities.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Stefan. I'm going to throw to Paul now.
Thanks, Katrina. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, this was such a different experience than drafting certification schemes and audit criteria. This had that balance of needing to have the law open in the background all the time to know where you really were, but at the same time being able to think creatively and think about learning in dev professionals, or maybe even just people in senior positions, or even maybe just training professionals who want to get this out into the world. So it was a real creative experience. When we were doing some of those slides and all of those bullets, and I would look at a slide of like 20 bullets, and I'd scratch my head and think, nobody's ever going to spend enough time looking at this to want to actually train this. But as it developed, you start to get to the point, which is it is a smorgasbord, and channeling the Swedish population, let's spell that correctly if we may. It is a smorgasbord, so you've got to go in and you've got to pick the bits that are going to be relevant for your audience. You've got to pick the meatballs, you've got to pick the potatoes, you've got to pick the Janssen, and you've got to work out, okay, so where am I going to present this? And who am I going to present this to? And then that's why this becomes guidance rather than training. And I think that's really exciting. To get this out into the world and to get people actually training this is going to be really great to see.
Absolutely. We will fix that smorgasbord spelling. Ryan, it's not quite spelled right in a couple places. We'll fix that. Thanks so much, Paul. Laura, I'm going to throw to you.
Yeah, I just would like to reemphasize that this is a comprehensive look at things, that nobody is immune to needing training on AI. It goes from the lowest level of a person in the organization all the way to the top. Nobody knows everything they need to know. And I also appreciate how diverse the group was working on this. And I think that was absolutely essential and really strengthened the work that we did.
Totally agree. Deborah, over to you.
First of all, every single session with ForHumanity is so much fun, and it's mental gymnastics. One thing I'd really like to stress to everyone: AI is being deployed across organizations mainly as an efficiency tool. And AI is not an efficiency tool only. It is mainly a socio-technical tool. And the more people get, you need to rewire your brain, you need to rewire the way organizations operate. And hence, when you're implementing AI, it is actually a transformational project, not an IT project. And so the people involved in in putting this AI literacy program together, and Katrina, Ryan, this has been an awesome session. Thank you. And really went into all the nitty-gritty in order to make that a reality. So if you want to stop people being zombies and truly intelligent human beings, engage more. But thank you for doing this.
Fantastic. And I echo all of those sentiments. One of the things I look forward to every week, which is spending time with this amazing group of people talking about these really important issues that matter. So thank you, all of you, for making this such a wonderful journey. Before I throw back to Ryan, I want to just share one story, a comment from Nazarene in the chat, talking about this idea of packaging and kind of validating some of what I was saying with a real world example of talking with a CEO and what's the point of this? They didn't see it. And she was able to kind of turn that around and put it into a perspective that he really got. So I think that's part of the challenge of the work is taking the guidance and then again, contextualizing it with your own perspective and context and doing that work. All right, so I'm going to throw back to Ryan. I'm going to ask you the anything else question that you want to cover as we're kind of moving towards the end point of the session. What else would you like to share with us?
So Paul's taxing my abilities here. Lauren has a question in the chat, I believe. Um, let's go with that first.
Okay, yes, Lauren, sorry about that. I missed that. You have a question about if we look at it from a government point of view, does the AI literacy obligation for Persona 1 mean the government must make citizens AI literate when it uses AI systems?
100%. So uh, I don't see any difference of impacted users, whether they're through government use of AI or corporate use of AI. It might be that those the impacted stakeholders are limited. So I don't want to say that it's all citizens because I think the users of a tool are what's listed in the law and recital 20, and that might not be all citizens. Depends on the scope, nature, context, and purpose of the AAA system. So I do think just like a corporation would have to figure out who's going to use this tool, government has to figure out who's going to use this tool, and government has a duty and responsibility in the same way to train those users. Look, we've provided guidance. It is not the law. We are not judges. We are not the EU regulatory authority on this matter. We have provided recommendations on how we think you can meet these obligations after about 18. We did this over about 18 months. It's our best efforts, our best thoughts of how to meet the obligations from amongst a diverse group, building consensus on how to meet these legal obligations.
Absolutely. And as someone who's worked in government specifically, Lauren, like I think there's a huge challenge because when I worked in municipal government, we had 73 lines of business ranging from snow removal to waste collection. And there was an appetite to want to apply AI across all of these kinds of channels. And so I think it's a really important duty that government has to fulfill that obligation for Persona 1, which again is their citizens. So it's everyone. And there's a lot of work to be done there. All right, I'm just going to check the chat one more time, make sure I haven't missed anything else. There's a lot going on here, lots of commentary, but I think I've got all the questions. If you do have other questions, again, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. But now I'm going to ask Ryan to answer that anything else question. And so, Ryan, over to you.
So I've put into the chat two links. I want to explain these links. The Get Involved link is the one I mentioned earlier, where if you provide your email address and you agree to the code of conduct, you're going to be welcomed into Slack. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a fast flash of my Slack. My Slack has everything. You're looking at my Slack, is that right? Yes. Yep. Okay. So you can see all these different working groups, you're welcome to be in all of these different working groups. This working group right here, AI literacy. Okay. You're welcome to join all of these. I advise you to carefully manage your notifications if you do such a crazy thing. Okay. But the point is of ForHumanity Slack is access and transparency. We want you to be able to get a hold of everything. So that's why I say you can be in everything. Okay. So AI literacy is there. I'll just give you a quick flash of here's where we do the EU AI Act work. Here's where we did our GDPR work. And then down here, we have a whole bunch of different country teams. So later today, we have a group meeting to draft audit requirements for Team Nigeria. And as you can imagine, we basically coordinate that conversation out of this channel right here. Okay. So that's ForHumanity Slack. The other thing, and I'm just going to drag it over here, is it's listed, the URL is ForHumanity University. I'm actually going to log out because it's going to be easier to do. You're looking at well, I don't know that you're looking at the courses, right? Yes? Okay. So Nazarene, the first you have to use the registration, the Get Involved URL. You will fill out a very small form that comes to me, and then I invite you to Slack. Okay. So once you fill out that Get Involved link, very short form, then you'll get an invitation. The second one is where you can create a student account. A student account, all learning, all course materials are free. The only time you have a cost is when you sit for a certification exam. So if I log in, I'm just going to show you how this works. On my dashboard, I have all the courses that I'm involved with, which is all the courses. Okay. So I can see any or all of the courses. For all of you, what you're going to do is you're going to go to Site Home and you're going to be able to choose. So this is Foundations of Independent Audit of AI Systems, is that 2-minute explanation I did at the beginning of this whole session. It's 12 and a half hours deeper. It's why do we do what we do? How we, why does audit result in responsible AI, trustworthy AI? How do we audit that you've done your training and education responsibilities? Those criteria are all there. So foundations kind of get you started in that world. And then you'll see this next course, implementing AI literacy. This is that I'm not sure how many days it's going to be, 5 to 7. I got to lay out the curriculum, but it's going to be fairly short form. But what we're going to do is we're going to basically go through every bullet point on these 75 pages. Okay. And we're going to talk about a little bit about what it means. We might welcome use case examples from the students to say, I'm working on this AAA system. You talked about this ethical learning objective. Can you give me an example of how that works? And that's what I would do. Okay. Is try to walk you through those use case examples. There's lots of other courses here. I'm not going to go through all those, but in any case, what you can do, see this little black button over here? It looks like a kind of a doorway. You simply self-enroll. I can't do it because I'm already enrolled, but you self-enroll yourself in any of these courses, and then you'll get access to them when they start. Every course on here is fully populated with the exception of Indian personal data protection, which starts on Monday, and then we populate it, and then implementing AI literacy, which will populate together in the first week of December.
Good stuff. Before we've got about 13 minutes, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, and you made a comment about phase 2 of AI literacy. So I want to bring us back to AI literacy, talk a bit about where we're going with phase 2 of AI literacy.
Yep, and also I realized that people were looking for the slides and I hadn't posted them yet. So let me post the link to the slides. These are also on our website under under what we call a body of knowledge for AI literacy. So if you lose the ability to access the slides, you can get them on the website, or you can always ping me or Katrina or kind of anybody else who's been on the team. You want me to show phase 2?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, so I think I have that up. I do. Okay, so phase 2, sharing screen. All right, so phase 2 is ForHumanity's work on AI literacy in general. Now, there are literally millions and millions of use cases. We cannot go into those in detail. We just can't. It's impossible. So instead, what we're doing is we're building out what I would call many-faceted approach to providing generic AI literacy in modular steps, in bite-sizable pieces. Okay. So that if somebody does click a learn more, they could learn more about risks of AI. They could learn more about controls or risk controls for AI. They could learn more about benefits. They could learn more about specific, and I'm going to scroll. Actually, I'm going to pull up, not that one, this one. So one of the things that we're doing is we want to reach a wider audience of persona ones. So what we're working on creating, and we're going to do this in a multifaceted way, is 90-second content descriptions. Okay. So for example, what does the future of work in AI possibly replacing jobs look like? What does the risk, what do the risks of deepfakes look like? Awareness of who is regulating these tools. Realities of AI cost and benefit. So we're going to create all of these kind of content items and make them available to influencers, make them available. We're going to invite influencers to bring their own ideas according to their own content guidelines. We're going to do generic training on we're going to create explainer audio and videos in digestible chunks. We're going to perhaps do YouTubes or similar other channel aggregations. We're going to do TV shows, short form documentaries, podcasts, all in the hope of getting to that mission statement that I talked about in the beginning of how do we mitigate risk to humans through AI literacy, right? And so right now we are in the exploratory phase. It's probably the most creative thing we've ever done. Cognitive bias and this are probably together of, and you can see it on here. Are we going to create gamification? Are we going to create physical board games that help people learn AI and AI literacy? Maybe. Are we going to seek out doing a feature film? Maybe 2 hours worth of something like Michael Lewis might put together. For those of you who know Michael Lewis's work, are we going to hold town halls where we can have ask me sessions where literally moms and pops could show up if they want to and say, I was using AI this way and this thing happened to me. What could I have done differently? Whatever. We are in the exploratory phase of what learn more looks like. And you're all welcome to join that. It's every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And if you have never seen our website, I'm going to show you a couple of things here. Oops. Sorry. Let me use an existing link. I'll be back to you in 2 seconds. There it is. Okay. So that screen. Okay. If you come to the main page of our website, here's that get involved tag. So if you want to join the Slack community, you're going to click here. And if you want to create your student account, you're going to create go to the ForHumanity AI Education Training Center link. This is on the header of all the pages at ForHumanity. The other thing that's on the header of all the pages is this calendar button right here. If you click that calendar button, you get this page that you see right here. And what you'll see is on Wednesday at 11 a.m. is AI literacy. If I click that link, I have the Zoom meeting link and you can show up, whether you're part of the Slack community or not. You'll want to be part of the Slack community because sometimes something comes up and we change the meeting or we start it late or things like that. And we notify those things in the channel. But if you're not part of the community, you can just show up to any of these meetings. They're all open and you're always welcome. There's no imposter syndrome in ForHumanity. We welcome. One of the reasons that that's important to understand is some of us have been doing this for years. And we're so far in the weeds that we may not actually see the big picture. So somebody showing up fresh and being like, Ryan, you just said a whole bunch of words and they meant nothing to me. Can you say it differently? Can you explain it in a better way? And we go, yeah, that's important. So we take steps back. Okay. So anybody showing up at any time is welcome in the work that we do.
Yeah, Paul.
Just a quick one. I know we don't have much time left, but for the purpose of the video, I wanted to capture this. Ryan, once somebody's signed up and done the course, the AI literacy course, and then perhaps they choose or don't choose to certify, how can they then take this resource out into the world and start to commercialize it? I'm not thinking of people internally in companies, I'm thinking of people that run training organizations that want to use this. Can they license it?
They can license it. So ForHumanity works in 2 ways. We are a nonprofit public charity, but there's an awful lot of volunteer intellectual property that's gone into all these different bodies of work, as you can see. So those who would commercialize it, in other words, if you're going to, we encourage it. First off, we encourage everybody to commercialize all of our work. So we want you to do it. But if you do it under license. There is a licensing fee that is payable after you've made money. So you don't have to take the risk of, ooh, will people care about what For Humanity thinks? No, no. Just go out and do. And if you make some money, we are a nonprofit public charity. We're lightly funded. I did this work free for 7 years. Um, we want to be able to keep the lights on and be able to keep doing what we do. And that's why we charge licensing fees. That's why we charge certification fees for the exams. This is how we fund the organization. I wish we had a number of employees. I wish we had somebody dedicated just to this work because I think we would get so much more leverage and impact by doing it. But until we're funded better, we have to rely on best efforts and volunteerism and you all to take this, what we think is good and useful work out into the marketplace and to help mitigate risk to humans.
Well,
Did I
I
answer
think
your
that,
question? Oh, sorry. I just
sorry.
want to make sure that, yeah, we were good with Paul. We are.
I think we're good. And I think that that is a lovely segue to kind of wrap things up. And I think the call to action here is we need you at this table somewhere. And so if you feel so inspired, there's definitely links that are being shared in the chat. Go sign up. I can say you're not going to regret that. You're not. I certainly haven't. It's been a wonderful experience, and I look forward to all of the For Humanity work that I continue to be engaged with. And I'm especially excited about the second phase of AI literacy. I think there's a lot of opportunity here to shape the culture. And I really think that what we need to do, in addition to the laws, which are definitely important, we also need to think about the norms and the culture. And a lot of the really fun work that we're about to embark on, I think, is going to go a long ways towards shaping that. So in the last, I'm going to just, I guess, give the last word to you, Ryan. Is there anything else that you want to cover and or just close off today's meeting with?
No, I like what you just said. This is the most ambitious leverage reach that we're trying to achieve. And it is about raising awareness, educating people, empowering individuals to, I don't know, use technology wisely. And so this is a great way to bring your passions, your interests, your expertise. Maybe you're a podcaster. Maybe you are a content creator. Maybe you're an influencer here, right? We want to enable and empower you to be able to do the things that you care about in the context of our mission. Okay. So literally, if it fits into our mission, anything you want to do, For Humanity wants to support you in. Okay. So please think of us as a support mechanism, as a way of enabling and empowering you to achieve your goals. As long as we're achieving the mission, then it makes sense for Humanity. Katrina, thank you for being the host for this. I hope it was helpful for everybody.
You're very welcome. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Really appreciate you being here.